Okay, guys, this is it. Welcome this morning to the Fife property crash in 2022. QVT. Okay, guys, this is it. Everybody's talking this into existence. Perry, is everybody talking this into existence?
It's all you see at the moment, isn't it? And it's all you're hearing about just now. And I think there's an expectation as well that people think things are going to start kind of going on the downturn, isn't there?
Luna's dropped from £1 million to $3. It's like, oh my God! It's like, did anybody not tell you that crypto was gambling?
Exactly.
Where do people get that idea? But this is factual. This is all about the property crash in 2022, which apparently is coming, and we're going to talk about it. I'm going to talk about, according to some of the newspapers and pundits, the property market boom could soon be over, and for the increasing interest rates and inflation as well. So what we're going to talk about is 3 fundamental economic reasons why things are going to be different than the last property market crash. The insider's way to find out how there will be, if there will be a property market crash, and 4 reasons why buy-to-let landlords are coming back into the rental market to protect their wealth and hedge against inflation. So, Perry, what's the situation so far? Where is inflation, cost of living crisis?
Well, certainly what we've kind of done in our research here is with inflation and cost of living crisis, some say that this could cause cause property values to drop by about between 10 and 20% in the next 12 to 18 months. That's a massive prediction, Jim, isn't it?
It's doom and gloom mongers again. Listen, guys, if you're watching out there, please feel free to contribute this. If you feel there's going to be a property market crash in the UK, then tell us why. Give us some information, give us some advice, and then tell us why you think that is relevant to the property market crash. Also, if you think we're talking total bollocks, then tell us why.
If we know nothing, be quite willing to share. But I think there can be no doubt that the current property market we're finding it quite interesting, aren't we?
Yeah, it's interesting, but if you look at the fundamentals, what we're going to discuss here, we'll come to the conclusion at the end. But you formulate your own conclusion. That's what it comes down to, and we'll look at the facts, because I always base everything on where we are right now, where things are predicted to go, how will that affect it overall, how have we learned from the past before, and let me just exacerbate and extrapolate this a wee bit more. So 8 to 20% for property prices between the next 12 to 18 months, I reckon it'll drop. Okay, there can be no doubt that the property market is very interesting, especially the Fife property market, because it's quite unique, and I'll tell you why throughout this conversation. At the time of writing this and putting this article together, there was 537 properties for sale in the Fife market. Now, that's similar to other areas like, London and all the rest of it, proportionately anyway. Now, listen, the long-term 15-year average was between 1,650 properties and 1,700 properties up for sale. So we're less than a third of that stock currently on the market right now, which means house prices have gone up considerably as a result of that. Yeah. According to the land registry, property prices in Fife have gone up 15.8% in the last 12 months. That's £22,800 of an increase. So as Robert Kiyosaki says, now this is rich dad, poor dad. And most people in the property business know about Robert Kiyosaki and what he says. So the best way to predict the future is actually to look at the past. And we need to look at what's caused this and what caused the last property crash in 2008 and how that compares to today. So do you want to kick off with interest rates, Perry? Do you want to talk about interest rates and how that's affected things?
Yeah. Just before we get onto that, I know what you mentioned there, Jim, is that when the article was written, there was 537 properties. So I checked Zoopla this morning, and it's sitting at 559. So, 560. What we've been seeing when we've been doing the show, and anybody watching the show will see that over the last kind of few weekly updates we've done, the number has sat around about the 500 mark, isn't it? And we've
Yeah.
talked about that's really like a 4-week rolling stock, isn't it? 500 each week's what we've seen. So it's a slight increase. I mean, that's 12% increase in 1 week, but I don't think that proves the trend 1 week. So
15-year average is 1,500 to 1,700 properties over the last 15 years.
Exactly. So we just need to keep an eye on that. But I think one of the reasons mentioned is the possible crash could be because the Bank of England interest rates are affecting homeowners and mortgages. Higher mortgage rates means homeowners will have to pay a lot more for their mortgage payments, leaving less for other household essentials. In 2007 and in 1989, property crash, many Fife people put their houses up for sale to downsize to try and reduce their mortgage payments. Yet, what the newspapers fail to tell everybody is 79% of British people are on a fixed rate mortgage anyway. So it makes no difference.
So why would it make any difference to them if interest rates go up? Big deal. Almost 80% of people. Yeah, that's crazy. That's effectively what's that? Effectively 1 in 5. Or 4 in 5.
4 in 5.
I don't know what that works out. 4 in 5. 4 in 5 people actually have a fixed rate interest rate mortgage right now. So why would that affect anybody? And when you think about it, that's right across the whole of Britain. They're on a fixed rate, and the average rate is 2.03%.
And that's nothing, is it? Really?
Yeah, I mean, also just under, when you think about it, just under 19 out of 20, 93.2% of all UK house purchases in 2021 was with a fixed rate mortgage. So more and more people, 93% of people in 2021 actually fixed the rate of mortgage. So in the short to medium term, the 2 to 5 years, most homeowners won't actually see a rise in their mortgage payments for many years to come. Also, 27.8% of UK house purchases were 100% cash. So there's no mortgage. So it doesn't affect them at all. 27.8%. That's a quarter of people. Over a quarter of people are not affected at all and have no difference of interest rate rises. So how many house purchases were registered since February 2021 then?
Again, this is quite an astonishing number, isn't it? 932,577 in 2021.
That's almost 1 million houses.
Almost 1 million people
registered. That's a crazy figure when you think about it. But 259,205 again were bought without a mortgage. So that wouldn't make any difference to them at all if interest rates rise.
Makes no difference. No, absolutely not. And I think the fact that the 5-year fix is there as well for a lot of people, because a lot of people have managed to get, you can get 2, 3, 4, 5-year fix, can't you? So worst case scenario, even the people that are on a that's fixed for 2 years, it's going to see them through, hopefully, what is an economic squeeze for people just now, isn't it? Just on the cost of living in general, in regards to energy bills, etc. We're all experiencing that. And we're even experiencing that in business, aren't we, Jim? So Jim got a bit of a scare when the old gas bill came in the other day for the Cooper office for the heating.
I was surprised, but I think it's more usage than anything. I don't think that was anything to do with the fact of the cost going up or anything like that.
It was usage.
When you think about it, some people will see will say there will be a problem when these homeowners come off their fixed rate. The mortgage lending rules, remember, changed in 2014. Every person taking out a mortgage would have to be assessed an application as to whether they could afford the mortgage payments at a mortgage rate of between 5 and 6%. So there was stress testing in there, not the 2 and 3% we've got now. People are actually paying right now. So there's stress testing to the point of almost double, maybe 3 times the amount of mortgage payments as it is right now for most people. No pundit says the Bank of England. No pundit says the Bank of England interest rates will go above 2% in worst case scenario. Now, I talked about in the Wealth Creation Show, I actually showed the graph at the Bank of England, the Bank of Scotland corporate division, because I was talking to them in a private Zoom session about something else. And they were going through all the details and all the information. So they actually predicted, and they showed me that graph going up to the 2% level and then dropping back down as a result. So base rates might go up to about 2%, but that's all they see it going up to. I actually have a feeling that probably they won't go up as much as we think because of the current situation with Ukraine. And that, because the only thing that's driving inflation really is the scarcity of resources, and that's caused by the current situation with Russia.
Absolutely, completely agree with that actually, and I think that's where you're seeing the impact of things, isn't it? It's supply and demand again, isn't it?
Yeah, and the Bank of England raised interest rates though to 3%, the base rates, homeowners would only be paying 4.5 to 5.5% on their mortgages. And that's within the stress test. So if they've been stress tested already, it's not going to affect homeowners because they've been stress tested on their current situation between the 5 and 6% rates. This means the probability of a mass sell-off. This is what happened in the last one in 2007. A mass sell-off, the probability of that, of the properties and repossessions because of the interest rate rises, and both of which caused the house prices to drop in the credit crunch, is extremely low. The probability of that happening is extremely low. So interest rates could actually be scratched off the card as an impending factor about why people think it will cause a problem. It might cause a problem for businesses because they're sometimes based on tracker rates. They're not fixed as such. I mean, I know as a business, not as in my buy-to-let business, if you fix for a tracker rate right now, you're paying 5-year fixed rate deals on the swap at 5 and 6%. And yet just now you're getting them around at 3%. So why would you not just take the 3? Because it's not going to go up that much. And by the time you stress test it, it's unlikely to go between 5 and 6% anyway on a tracker rate that you're getting right now. So it wouldn't have any effect on the current people that have got mortgages and current businesses that have lending. The only thing that will affect that is the over-gearing that you've got as a business or as an individual for lending. So over-gearing is all about loan to value. So in other words, if you've got more loans, so 90% of your mortgage is maybe, we're going to talk about this actually. We are actually going to talk about loan to value and stress testing percentages and that. So
I think that's a really good topic.
Let's not burst that bubble just now. Dave actually asked a really good question. Good morning, Angela, by the way. Any questions, please ask. Do you think the fear factor reporting is a major driver as a lot of stress testing is in place? Absolutely, Dave. You've hit the nail on the head. It's amazing how many people just want to come out the woodwork and be the prophet of doom because it gives them center of attention now. Because it's now, oh, well, look at me, I'm going to tell you this is what's going to happen. And it makes them the center of attention. So they love the attention and they love the fact that people like or share or comment on their posts. And that's what's driving the market for some people. They just love that attention for the fact. But the facts are, interest rates, the position right now, it's all stress tested to double anyway. So everybody's fine. There'll not be mass sell-offs as a result. So that's that out of the way.
I think so. I think you're right in that as well. And what Dave says is true, not just on the stress testing piece as well, though. I think when you put the TV on and you're watching all the news channels, there's a lot of deflecting going on at the moment from other things. So they're refocusing on something else, aren't they, to try and divert the attention away from one story to another story. And primarily they're focusing on this now to allow them to continue to behave the way they want to behave, I guess.
Oh, you cynic.
That's what I truly think that, though, don't you?
Of course it is. We know that. It's like, you always think to yourself, oh, there's something in the news. And it's like, oh, that's not really that there. What are they trying to sneak through behind the back door that we don't know about? And you see it time and time again. Often there's legislation getting pushed through in different areas. It's like it never gets the attention it deserves because all of a sudden something else is taking the place of that. Let's talk about house price salary ratio. What are you thinking about that?
Oh, for me, I think that's a massive factor, and we'll cover quite a bit of this. In 2007, 2008, I was actually working in the financial services sector, and mortgage products was one of the things that we were involved heavily in. And actually, when you think about what was happening in those times, it's quite scary and you could see how the stress testing just went out the window and it didn't exist, to be honest with you. They just were lending silly amounts to people, weren't they? But another reason bandied about by some people are another house price crash is the ratio of average house prices compared to average wages. The higher the ratio, the less affordable property is. In 2000, the UK average house price to average salary ratio was 5.3%. The average UK houses was 5.3 times more than the average UK salary. Just its peak before the last property crash in 2008, the ratio reached 8.64%. You can see why that's then a struggle for people, can't you? Because that's completely out with all the stress testing, and also out with actually value of their property and their loan to value, which we're going to cover. The ratio now is 8.85. So some commentators are beginning to think that we're in line for another house price crash. However, we kind of disagree with that, Jim, don't we?
Yep, because if you look at Fife is 178,000 as average price. The average salary is 30,000 and the price ratio is 6 times. So Fife is a bit different from the microcosm because that's what I talked about being in isolation. Whereas the rest of the UK is sitting at this 8.85 and the 9 times. Fife's actually sitting at 6. So Fife is still tolerable and Fife is still more affordable to everybody else because the average price salary ratio is a lot lower as a result. And you're absolutely right. I mean, some commentators are actually say we're in line with another house price crash. But yes, I mean, you disagree because the mortgage rates are much lower today than 2007. I mean, here's an example. Okay. 5-year fixed rate mortgage in 2007 was 6.19% just before the property crash. Yet today it's 1.79%.
It's a huge difference.
Totally different, isn't it?
Huge difference.
Let's look at a wee graph and show you this in graph form. There it is right there. See that dropping like a stone? That is from the 2000s all the way down. So 7%. There's the yellow one's the 3-year, the 5-year fixed rate mortgage. The white one is the actual 3-year fixed rate mortgage, and the red one is the 2-year fixed rate mortgages, and green is 2-year variable. See how they've all dropped since the beginning of the 2000s. All dropped like a stone right up to 2022. So I'm gonna call the media out on and just say bullshit. Okay. Honestly, you could see I have no tolerance for this anymore. It's like the doom and gloom mongers are out there at their best, and they're trying to spread it as much as possible to prove themselves right. Because it doesn't matter. People like that just want to prove themselves right. They just want to see the world burn. But as long as they're right, they don't care.
Yeah.
It's like, but this is the facts right in front of us right now. So whilst house price salary ratio is the same as the last property crash in 2008, mortgages today are proportionately 71.1% cheaper, less expensive. 71.1% less expensive mortgage rates than it was in 2008, even though the multiplier is the same. But all they'll talk about is the multiplier, the cost, the salary to house price ratio. That's the only thing they want to talk about because it proves their stuff. They want to sell you the Kool-Aid, I'll call it. And their Kool-Aid is all about doom and gloom.
Yeah. It goes back to exactly what we said at the outset of the show, though, isn't it, Jim? It's that what they're trying to do is give you that hype. And actually, they just tell you about current day change. What they don't say is, but if you reflect what is we're doing and look at what it was historically, and you actually see the improvement, it's not a negative, but at the moment it's kind of perceived as a negative because they're not giving you any of that back information to say, actually, we're in a stronger position than we've ever been, even though it may be slightly negative because the change is there.
I would say boots on the ground, we are in a stronger position than we've ever been, but there is other things and other factors behind the doors, like derivatives and stuff like that, and things that the banks have bought into and overgeared themselves on. So they all rely on future purchasing, which is all a part of their borrowing criteria. But that's another story completely, and that's a minefield. And this is kind of how the banks got caught out the last time. But it's right there in black and white for us, and we can see it there in terms of the house price to salary ratio. And then the difference is it's the same as a credit crunch, but however, mortgage rates are 71.91% cheaper as a result. So let's take a couple of comments. Good morning, Andrea. How are you, Angela? Yeah, massive difference, isn't it? And you're absolutely right. This is all media hype. This is determined. We've now got our teeth into a story, and every single journalist wants to make money. So what they do is they run about because they're all self-employed. So they're all run about now and all get people to feed into what they want to believe and what they want the public to believe as well. And that's where everything comes from. And all the stories come from there as well. Let's talk about banks' reckless lending, because I touched on that a wee bit the other now. Another reason for the property crash in 2008 was the reckless lending practice that actually ran up to the crash itself. The first example of reckless lending was the self-certified mortgages. A self-certified mortgage is when the lender doesn't actually require proof of income. Now, some of the buy-to-let lenders have actually done away with the proof of income now. They've just done credit searches, and it could be creeping in a bit, but it's not that significant. In 2007, about 25% of new mortgages were self-certified mortgages. That's 1 in 4. So when the economy got a little sticky in 2008, the people that didn't have the income that they said they had, here's the key there, they didn't have the income they said they had to pay off their mortgages because they were self-certified, properly put their properties on the market immediately and flooded the market. The bank's second aspect of reckless lending was how much they were lent to the buyers to buy their actual homes. Today's banks want first-time buyers to have at least a 10% deposit, and ideally more. Even buy-to-let lenders insist it's 25%, whether you like it or not. Corporate banks, for bigger lending like mine, insist it has to be 40% down. They're only giving 60%. And even at a push, Barclays is doing 65. But they are not entertaining at all any more than that, because they do not want to be back where they are right now. Okay, so there are 95% mortgages available now, meaning first-time buyer only requires a 5% deposit. Yet they are pretty challenging to obtain. But remember as well, they're backed by the guarantee from the government. The government put in a 95% guarantee mortgage, and so they've actually guaranteed the difference, because what the government did is they stepped in and they guaranteed the difference between I think it was the 75% and the 95%. So they guaranteed the 20% difference. So if anything happens with the banks, they've got a guarantor in place for the 20% differential with any difference in price. What about 2005, 6, and 7? What happened with that? Northern Rock.
That was absolutely incredible what they were getting.
I thought it was crackers, honestly. Just before you go on this, I thought it was crackers. I actually sat in front of my mortgage broker, and I was going for a new mortgage on my place and leaving. And he says to me, you know, the Northern Rock's taking out this 125% loan. Sorry, what? Now I'm an accountant, and I was sitting there as an accountant going, who gives 125% loan on a property? That's mental. I says, what am I meant to do with the other 25% then when I get it? He went, oh, go and buy a car. Now, genuinely, that's what he said to me. And that was obviously before regulation from mortgage brokers. He says, just go buy a car if you want, or anything, have a holiday. So, I mean, even Rich Dad, Poor Dad and all the rest of it, my process thinking at that time. Now, I wasn't heavily into buy-to-let at that time. And even I thought at that time, it's like, no, you don't just go and spend money like that, because that's just spending money, and that doesn't actually invest in anything. If anything, they'd take 25% and invest it in something else. But he didn't encourage that at all. So I think that's what most people did. So that was the situation, wasn't it, with Northern Rock?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we saw. And actually, in some instances back in that time, there were some lenders that were actually giving up to 130%, never mind 125%. And it was bonkers. And what people were doing in that time, because again, around about that time was really when revolving credit became a big thing as well, wasn't it? So not only were people, like you said, people were borrowing to their maximum because they were like thinking it's free money. And actually it wasn't free money, but what they were doing, as you say, is they weren't then investing it to maybe start a business or something. What they were doing is buying a nice car, going on holiday, or consolidating all the revolving credit so that they could actually then afford the payment for the 130%. But then what was happening, people were going back out again and then getting themselves in a situation where they were just respending on the revolving credit. And so people were just spiraling. And then there literally was squeeze on cash for everybody at that point. I mean, in 2005, 6, 7, Northern Rock was allowing first-time buyers to borrow 125%. First-time buyers, people who are just really finding their feet, coming to the market, never really had that responsibility before. It's bonkers, isn't it? And actually, sometimes they got 25% cash back, like you said. Again, why would you make that happen? In 2007, 9.5% of all mortgages were 95% or more. Whereas now it's like 6.1% of mortgages.
Yeah, the 6.1% of mortgages were 100 to 125% as well. That's a crazy figure when you think about it.
That's a large amount of people stretched to the maximum.
That's actually meaning that. What does that mean about then? What does that mean?
Well, what it meant was that 1 in 6 mortgages, 15.6% of them taken out in 2007, had a 95 to up to 125% loan to value.
That's a huge figure.
That is a massive, massive number of people who were totally stretched to the max and reliant on that price of that property either remaining as was, which was not a good position to be in because you're already overlent on it, or improving. And that just didn't happen, did it?
Yeah. I mean, when the value of the property goes below the owed mortgage itself, I mean, that's what we call negative equity. I mean, you know, some of the younger generation don't understand what negative equity was. A lot of Fife homeowners and homeowners in the UK were getting close to negative equity in 2008, panicked because of the credit crunch, and actually ran to the market and put their houses up for sale. Now, I know the crash was caused by a 6% run of the whole of the UK on putting all their houses on the market at once. 6% of the market actually just ran to the market all at once of the housing stock in the UK and put their houses on the market, and that's what caused the crunch. And incident, I was actually sitting across from the managing director of the Dunfermline Building Society when they got the call to say that it was a run on the bank. And I've never seen a guy ever in my life his face turn from red to white, just like that. Honestly, the blood just drained from here to here, right across the table. I just watched him and everybody went, "What's wrong?" He went, "There's a run on the bank." The next day, the Dunfermline Building Society was no more.
Crazy, yeah?
Yeah. I mean, the negative equity and the credit crunch putting out helps out. To give you an idea of what happened last year in 2021 regarding mortgage lending, only 2.4% of mortgages, look at this, 2.4% of mortgages were 95% mortgages and 0.2% of mortgages were 100%. This is because mortgage lending rules were tightened in 2014. So before we get to it, why did house prices drop in 2008? And we'll come to that in a minute. We'll take a couple of comments. Actually, Dave says, the facts get in the way of the narrative. Absolutely. Drilling down on the reality and local scenarios provide facts. Ben actually says ninja loans, no income, no job application. That's actually quite a good one, Ben. And you've got Andrea saying there was reckless lending by the banks. There was also a generation of people who want everything now. I call them the microwave society. They want everything right now in a microwave society and live beyond their means and have the manana attitude to everything. Yeah, okay. That's the younger generation for you. Only kidding. Listen, if anybody says, have you ever hear yourself saying that that's the younger generation, remember, we educated them like that. Dave actually says that education, here we go, education of finance just didn't happen. Not sure it does now. I don't think so. It happens now, actually, Dave. I don't think it actually happens at all. So that's quite an interesting one as well. So why did Fife house prices and house prices throughout the UK drop in 2008? Well, in a nutshell, a lot more Fife properties and properties themselves right out of the UK came onto market at the same time. This is a 6% flood of the market. And properties to sell. Meanwhile, mortgages became a lot harder to obtain because of the credit crunch and the subprime mortgages and the packaging them up with good mortgages. I think it's the kind of mind the film. There's a film on Netflix or something like that. It talks about the whole thing and how it all happened. The Big Squeeze or something, or The Big Easy. If anybody's got an idea, tell me in the comments. I can't mind what it was, but it was all about subprime lending, how it all happened. And so it reduced the demand for property overall. Prices will drop when they have an oversupply and reduced demand for something, but property prices fell by 16 to 19%, depending on the property type, between January 2008 and May 2008. I kind of remember that. I just started. It's like, and then this hit. And then it's like, whoa, we better pivot pretty quick. And you just, for the next couple of months, everybody sat lost in translation, I call it, where they were thinking, what's going on? Nothing's happening, nothing's moving. Because remember, our business is based on transactions. It's not based on house prices. So it doesn't matter what house prices are. It's all about transactions for us, where we make money. So what are the numbers for properties for sale during in Fife, particularly in the last housing market crash? I mean, what are they? Perry, what are the numbers? I mean, you tell me what the numbers are during the last property crash and compared to what they are now.
So there were 2,213 properties for sale in the Fife market in the summer of 2008 when the credit crunch hit. And that jumped up to 2,987.
Yeah.
This was, a vast jump in supply, and the reduction in demand caused Fife property houses to drop in 2008 because of that, didn't it?
Think about that, though. There's 3,000 properties was on the market at any one point in time. Now, there's about 6,000 transactions. So that means 50% of the properties typically sell in the year were all on the market at the same time in that credit crunch period. Then that means, on average, a house will take 6 months to sell, if that's the case, because it's 50% of the 12 months, because it's 50% of the stock it usually sells in the year. A vast jump in supply and the reduction in demand caused the house prices to drop in 2008. Compared to today, well, you said it at the beginning. How many properties this morning are on the market?
559. So when we did the article, it's 537, but it's 559 as of this morning, according to
the 15. When you think about the 15-year average, year on year for the last 15 years, has been 1,650 to 1,700 properties. And we're still sitting at what, 560?
559, yeah. So it's still a third.
So what's going to happen to the Fife property market and the property market overall? You know, what's your thoughts on that?
I mean, certainly we said that earlier on in the programme, didn't we, that Fife property market prices increased by 12.8% over the last 12 months.
Yeah.
I think for us as well, the explosion in Fife for property markets, I think it came about once we came out of lockdown, didn't it? And we certainly noticed that.
Think about it. This is a wee one to think about. For anybody out there, think about this, what Perry's just said, okay? And then what we've just discussed. If they came to a 10 to 20% drop in prices for Fife house prices, they've gone up 15.8% in the last year.
Yeah.
So we're going to be back where we were a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
Is that really a problem? I mean, how many properties in Fife were actually sold? So it's only going to affect 6,000 homeowners, but 6,000 homeowners aren't going to be moving house within the year or even the next year or the 5 years, because more than likely 50% of these people actually stay on average for 6 years, up to 6 years, and then 50% are actually longer. So that's not going to have any effect at all on anybody. And then we come back to interest rates and we come back to mortgages, and they're all sorted as well. So,
and when we look at the graph that you shared earlier as well, Jim, even at the people that have got the 2-year fixed, the volume on that 2-year fix is not going to be impacted at all in the next 2 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got a wee comment here about someone. They were the generation of the negative equity, and fast forward to today, I'm not sure how it impacted them. Sorry if it's a daft question, but how does this impact me or anybody else? I think it's just learning by experience and learning by what's happened. But you're absolutely right. I mean, how would that impact you? But if you've got a fixed rate mortgage, it won't have any impact on you at all. There'll be no difference. It won't affect you at all if you've got a fixed rate mortgage for the next 3 or 5 years. That's how in the late 80s, early 90s, when mortgage rates went up to about 15%, mortgage rates were up at 15%. I was on a fixed rate mortgage of 9% that year when they jumped to 15%, but it was budgeted for the whole year. So by the time it came down to the end of the year, it was up at 12. It was down to 12% again. So it jumped up to 15 by the Chancellor when they left the ERM, I think it was, exchange rate mechanism for anybody a bit younger or older or whatever. And then it stabilised the prices and actually brought interest rates back down to 12. So the impact on me wasn't that much because I had a budgeting rate mortgage at that time. So
I think actually that point that was made is a really good one, because that's really what we're trying to educate on, is the fact that what we're seeing in the media, but actually when you look at how it impacts, actually today it doesn't. That's the whole point, isn't it?
Yeah. So what's going to happen to the property market in Fife in general?
Certainly what we're seeing is that I think the biggest impact with the stats that we're looking at for us is that what we're seeing possibly is that where maybe houses were selling within 2 or 3 weeks, it's now taken 4 weeks as such. And I think that's just, there is a slight increase in the number that's out there. So people maybe have a different amount of choice, don't they? But other than that, really, we haven't seen a great impact so far, have we, Jim?
No, we haven't. Ben actually says quite a good comment about what happened the last time, and I can't see it happening again because of the way it's stress tested. 2008, they were mortgages were repackaged, double B and triple B bonds into triple and rated bonds. So they were actually packaged. Some of the subprime stuff or the dog shit stuff, to be honest, was repackaged in with good stuff and then sold off to the lenders as really good quality product for lending. Because that's what that's what banks are there for, to make money out of lending. Along with the fixed rate terms came to an end, causing variable rates to kick in 2008 and cause foreclosures and bag holders of property owners around the globe and a large bed of negative equity. That was the fall of Bear Stearns and the fall of Lehman Brothers. And again, that's what that film was all about. The Big Easy or the Big Short. Maybe it's called the Big Short. That's what it was. The Big Short, because this was all about shorting and the way it all works and all the rest of it. Subprime mortgages and selling stuff that you don't really have on the premise that it'll go up in price. That's weird. How could you sell something on the premise that it'll go up in price if you don't actually own it? And it's a pure betting game. but they were doing it because they were allowed to do it because they got huge bonuses for doing it, for bringing in more business, and that's what tended to cause that as well. The early signs of the discrepancy in the supply and demand of the Fife properties is starting to ease, and the properties overall. Yeah, it takes a while before it has the effect on the property market, and it'll come in time. And before it is, this will mean that buyer demand will ease off, while the number of properties to buy, supply increases. This should gradually bring the property market back in line with long-term levels, rather than the housing market crash we've seen before. So my advice really out of all this is to keep an eye on the number of properties for sale in Fife, even overall in your general area. So if you're outside of Fife, this doesn't just apply to Fife. This is actually the UK overall. And I would dare to say it's any economy in any market. It's got housing as its primary driver, because we are a big nation of homeowners, and a lot of things are actually driven on the price of houses, because it's like jobs for people doing them up. It's like shops for people buying things for your house, mortgages for banks for lending. So everything that revolves around the housing market.
The whole supply chain, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it should gradually bring it back in, as I said. So my advice is keep an eye on the number of properties for sale in Fife at any one point in time, and only worry if it starts to go beyond the long-term averages mentioned, which is 1,600 to 1,700 properties. That's the only time you'll need to worry. And we're only a third of the way there almost.
Yeah, 560.
So before I go, we need to chat about what inflation and the cost of living will do to the property market in general. Right, Perry, how will inflation and the cost of living affect the property market?
I think there's no doubt that the cost of living increase will have a dampening effect on buyer demand, won't it? Because it doesn't matter how comfortable you are and how much stress testing there's been done. People are become nervous, don't they? And if every time you're switching your TV on, it seems to be that everyone is challenged with what they have in regards to spare cash. So that in itself just causes a bit of negativity and nervousness about it, doesn't it? But if people have less money, they won't be able to afford such high mortgages, will they? And this will slow Fife house prices and UK house prices. But especially with Fife first-time buyers, I think there'll be a bit of a fear factor there, isn't it?
Yeah.
And again, because of the fact that we've seen the property increase in value for just under 13% over the last 12 months, people are having to pay more, goes without saying, for property, aren't they? Yet the reduction in first-time buyers is being balanced out by an increase in the landlords buying. And you'll know this, Jim, because obviously your business.
This is exactly what happened the last time, and we're going to talk about the 4 reasons why landlords will support the market and continue to buy.
Yeah. So, but landlords do support it because they're especially at the lower end. So they're keeping that foundation of the market going, aren't they? Because they're starting that chain of events for people moving from their first to their second to their third, and that's where the whole chain kind of commences, doesn't it? So we'll certainly see that the landlords will come into that, and I know we're going to cover that. But this in turn will stabilise the middle to the upper market, won't it?
Yeah, it does. It does, absolutely, because unless you've got a healthy overall market and you've got what I call the circle of life. Yeah, it's a bit like the Lion King thing. But it's the circle of life in terms of the actual housing market, where you're absolutely right. You've got the bottom end of the market where the first-time buyers enter into. They want to upgrade, but they need somebody to come in and take their place. So it's either going to be an investment landlord, or it's going to be another first-time buyer, or it possibly is maybe somebody downsizing down to the bottom end of the market because their house is far too big for them right now. But it's actually to get that circle to keep moving all the time and keep that recycling. And that's the most important point. It's to keep that stability. And for the buyer of their home, should they wish to take the next step on the property ladder, that's really what it comes down to. It means the values of such properties will see greater stability in the whole process of that happening. Definitely. So why are more Fife landlords looking to extend their buy-to-let portfolios, even in these economic conditions and circumstances? Well, let me tell you.
This is the juicy bit.
but it's the juicy bit because it floats my boat. It actually really, I resonate with this completely because I understand it completely as a result. What are the incentives for? Ben's actually made a good point. A media strive is called a FUD. Fear, uncertainty, doubt. They love spreading. They love spreading it. Absolutely. Yep. And we've got what are the incentives for landlords? There's actually quite a lot of incentives. So I'll talk about this, and then I'll talk about I'll cover that question at the end of this. So I see the new and existing Fife landlords in general come back into the market to add rental properties to their portfolios. This is prices are, remember, stabilising as a result of this, as the competition with first-time buyers is not so great then, because first-time buyers have then eased back a bit. They're not being outbid as much for that. Yet, more importantly, residential property is a good hedge against inflation. It's always been a great hedge against inflation. Firstly, in the medium term, property values tend to keep up with inflation. In the long term, they outstrip inflation. Fife, for example, in the last 20 years, has gone up 170%, the property values. Inflation, according to the Bank of England, has gone up 70%. Do the math. That's why it's a real good, if you understand the numbers and how they work and the dynamics of it and how that all fits in, and you get that right in the beginning, the end result is guaranteed. I say that, I do that every single time. I guarantee my end result before I've started the journey, because I know the numbers straight away. And I know, based on Robert Kiyosaki, as he says, look at past performance compared to what happens in the future, and see what people have done before, and actually take stock of that, and actually understand where the dynamics go. The trend is the same all the time. We are a nation of habitual people in terms of how we do things, in terms of human behavior. And it's the same every single time. Classic example right now, people run for the hills because the media tells them to do that. Whereas I run in and go, buy, buy, buy. I'm buying. You're selling, I'm buying. If it's at the right price and the numbers make sense, I'm buying. Because people always need houses to live in and a roof over their head. They will always rent or they'll always buy. So the banks will either make money on the mortgage, or landlords will make money on the investment. And you've got residual income coming in every single time because you've got someone else looking after the property. You go and do your day-to-day job. Well, that increases in wealth over a longer period of time. That's what property investment is for. If you get the numbers right, it is guaranteed success every single time. Okay.
But you're right. I think what we're doing here as well, and it's some of the comments are kind of related to it, is the fact that it's all about educating as well, isn't it? Because with the media hype, etc., they kind of do then form a bit of a sheep mentality, don't they?
Yeah.
And I think it is about educating yourself around it. And I think the comments that you're making there, Jim, and what we're going to talk about next as well, I think that you covered that off really well with Richard in the Wealth Creation Show Monday past. And you actually gave examples of how people could manage that and monitor it over a 2-year, 3-year, 4-year. And you were predicting actually to 10 years, 20 years, what that investment would give you in return. And I think when you actually see it like that in black and white and you fully understand how the mechanism works, this next section, you know, it's really
guaranteed success. The only person that marks it up is the person actually doing it, because they don't have the belief that they can do it. We're going to talk about that tomorrow on the Wealth Creation Show. We're talking about fear, false expectations appearing real. So we're going to talk about that and why fear stops you from doing what you're doing, and how you can overcome that fear in order to be extremely successful in the next 5, 10, 20, 15, 50 years, whatever you want, you can have. And I'll be honest about that. Whatever you want, you can have. And people say that, oh, how could you say that? Because I understand the dynamics of it. I've seen it before and I've done it myself. So I can do that. I can teach others to do that as a result. And that's why we do the Wealth Creation Show, for that very reason. It's not a feeder to buy a course. It's just genuine. It's just genuine advice and information. Hey, you don't listen. You don't need to listen to me. You don't need to drink my Kool-Aid. That's really what it comes down to. But if you like what I've got and you want a bit of that and you want to be like that, then absolutely, you follow the person that you want to be like. And that's exactly what I do. I see people that are far more successful than me in different fields, and all I do is try and replicate how some of the things that they do in order to how they succeed, and the way they think and the way they do it. Somebody actually mentioned to me the other day, I talked about in private with someone in a one-to-one session, and I talked about how I'm trying to recover £8,000 from BT. And I'm fighting tooth and nail to get it. But then I said to them, you know, there's going to come a point where I'm trying to work out if I should write this off, because by the time I've spent so many hours on it, I've lost about 20 or 30,000 pounds with the same hours I was trying to recover £8,000. And that person actually said, millionaire mentality. And us as broke people, this is how I've thought. This is how I thought before. We always cling on to scarcity and think, I need that 8,000. It's to prove a point. Here's another one. It's to prove a point. Yeah. It's just the point. It's like, I'm going to throw £50 million to prove my point. I'm not saying that could be somebody currently in the media. But just to prove my point and clear my name and all the rest of it. And fair enough, that's a different story for them. But that's how people are. I'm just going to do that to prove my point. They'll throw millions or thousands or tens of thousands of pounds at something to try and prove their point and recover £5,000 or £6,000. But the reality is, you can I was actually told by Robert Kiyosaki's business partner at that time, no one talks about him, Keith Cunningham. But Keith actually said to me in a workshop when we were talking together, he says, Jim, you could either be right or you could be rich, but you can't be both. Whoa, wait a minute, that's a bit deep. What do you mean? Why could I not be both? Why could I not be right and why could I not be rich? And he explained to me the overall situation, and it just, boom, just blew my mind. And he says, the penny dropped for me, and I understood completely what he meant by that. Some things you've just got to let go. Don't feel compelled to comment on social media if the person's a deadbeat. To be honest, you know, don't bother. Why waste your energy? Why waste your positive thinking? Why let them bring you down to that level? That's the reality. And I've got that completely in a nutshell. Okay, let's talk.
It's that as well, but it's also about the case that, as you mentioned there, and we talk about it as a team often, don't we? It's like, with the time that we're spending, what's the value that we're adding? And we talk about that all the time, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. Dave actually says building awareness and understanding is like gold. Absolutely. Dare I say data now, because data is more valuable. Just a play on it. I thought I'd say something. Yeah, absolutely. Very good contributions. I'm glad you've actually got something out of it. Listen, if you've got something out of it, guys, please feel free to share it with other people. Please feel free to tag other people in it as well, because we'll all need to get this message out. A rising tide lifts all ships at the end of the day. In times of turbulent or certain times of risk-off markets, people and investors flock to gold and Japanese yen for stability. Always a good hedge too. But I would argue that, Ben, gold doesn't pay you to wait, where property does. Every single time you wait on the value of property going up, you're renting it to someone else and it's creating an income for you at the same time. Gold doesn't do that. Crypto doesn't do that. And silver certainly doesn't do that either. And this is the only mechanism that I know that actually hands off passive investment, almost like writing a book in the beginning and then letting the royalties come in over the years, is almost like what property investment is. You put all the effort in the beginning, you plant the seed, you nurture the seed, you build the seed, you put everything in place, you spend the investment, you grow and nurture it over the time and water it and let it grow in a big massive tree, and then you reap the rewards over time. And then every year it keeps growing and rewarding and growing and rewarding and growing and rewarding until the day you think about, I should sell it. And that's chopping down the tree that bears the fruit. So whatever you do not sell unless it's absolutely necessary. But there's numbers as well behind that to hedge your position, to make sure you're covered. Ben actually talked about that privately to me last night. Says, oh, you've got to make sure you're hedged and all the rest of it. Absolutely, Ben. But I tell you what, in any crisis, we're going to find out who's swimming naked when the tide goes out. And this will be a really interesting one, isn't it? I love that one. That's Warren Buffett.
Yeah. I'm just trying not to.
That's saying it all.
I'm blacking the image.
I've got to say genuinely, you know, you just imagine that if folk go, oh, hiding. But financially, he's talking about it. We'll all see who's swimming naked when the tide goes out, and that's the reality, and that will happen. But I'm a great fan of Warren Buffett and the way he thinks and his mentality. It's all about long-term, long-term, long-term. It's all about steady residual income every single time while it appreciates in value. Now, he concentrates on businesses and stocks and shares, whereas I concentrate on property. Basically, the same principles apply to the different entities and different vehicles to make
the fundamentals are the same, aren't they? It's just the product is different.
Absolutely. So secondly, inflation benefits both landlords and existing homeowners. I'll say that again. Secondly, inflation benefits both landlords and existing homeowners with effective inflation on mortgage debt. Think about that. As house prices rise over time, it reduces the loan value percentage of your mortgage debt and increases your equity in the property. When a landlord or homeowner comes to remortgage in the future, they will actually receive a lower interest rate because they're going to remortgage it with a higher value now. And yet they've not even done anything to actually put that value on. That is just time it's passed while they've earned income at the same time. Penny will start to drop with most people watching this about property investment. And it's like, oh, wait a minute, I'm in the wrong business. I should be, listen, what you do outside, what you do in your day-to-day in your job creates your living, okay? What you do outside of that is what property is, creates your lifestyle. And that's the key here. Make sure you've got both. Day-to-day living is exchanging time for money. You want to make sure you've got something outside of that. It doesn't rely on time for money anymore. And that's what property investment is to me. Thirdly, let's talk about the third thing. As the equity in your property increases, your fixed rate mortgage payments actually stay the same. And your rent goes up as well at the same time. That's the final one. The inflation also helps the investors because the rents tend to increase with inflation. So as rents go up, as salaries go up, the fixed rate mortgage payments become the same, creating the prospect of more significant profit and margins for your investment overall. I mean, what more do you want? Flipping heck. If you see at the end of this, if you still believe there's going to be some sort of property crash in 2022, in my opinion, well, I've not done my job properly. I've not conveyed this to you as a result. The article's on here, so you can read it on the post on the link here. So you can click on that and read it again and go over it again. Please take time to watch this again or listen to this on the podcast when it's on there later on, because that gets uploaded as well. And keep going over that. I'm just finishing Think and Grow Rich Again by Napoleon Hill. And I read that over 50 times. And I tell you, I read it the other now and I thought, I've never read this book before. And why is that? Because I've learned a lot more in the time between the last time I read it and this time I've read it. And I've also forgotten a bit more as well from I read it the last time. So it's actually topping up what I know already, but it's reinforcing the things that I need to learn for the future and to understand what I need to do to get that higher level. And that's what Think and Grow Rich does for me. And there's a revised version out now. I found out because Richard's reading that one, the revised version. And we were talking about that for the show tomorrow and talking about Think and Grow Rich and the fear factor. And he says, I didn't have that. I didn't have that in my... that's how old the book is I've got for Think and Grow Rich. I think it's about 30 years old. So the revised version doesn't have anything what I've got in it anymore. So I'm learning from all these people like Carnegie, like Ford, like Lincoln, like all these different people and all their success, Edison as well. That was in the original version of Think and Grow Rich and how they made it. Now the Edison today is people like Elon Musk. You know, that's these type of people. But that's what you learn from more successful people. So everybody goes on about, you know, oh, you're writing a book and you're going to be a millionaire because you've written a book and you're going to sell it to everybody and that's how you're going to make your money. But I tell you what, the fact that these books have timeless content in it, which you can go back and principles and you can read it every single time. It's like a masterclass in wealth creation for a lot of these books, but it's actually knowing what books to read from the right people. And that's what we talk about in our wealth creation show. So that's 12. Did I talk about the wealth creation show at 12:30 tomorrow?
Not yet.
Five.
I think you're right. I think what you say as well, though, it doesn't really matter what version of the book that you've got and how many times that you read it. Yeah. I think as you become more educated, actually what you're reading means something that you didn't expect it to mean, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Final thoughts on this, Perry. What's your thoughts? I mean, what's your thoughts once we've discussed this?
I mean, for me, as a homeowner, I feel very comfortable with where things are. I'm on a fixed rate mortgage. I understand what my financial position is. I know where I am and I've got a guaranteed place for the next 3 years in regards to what my outgoings are. Obviously, there's other impacts to that, the economy, etc., in regards to other bills, etc. But this is primarily about the property. So for me, I have a certain comfort about it. And it's as Ben and Dave are saying as well, it's all about actually getting your knowledge, getting your education, understanding where we're at. And actually, whatever you're watching on the news, don't be joining the sheep. You know, educate yourself, understand it, be calm about it, don't panic, because actually what we're saying is it's taking care of itself. And we're in such a strong position now compared to what we were back in the last crash. And we're nowhere even near the same statistics. And we've proven that through this whole article, that nothing is mirroring from before.
Yeah, absolutely. My final thoughts on it are as question everything. Anything that comes out of everybody's mouth, make sure you're educated enough to say, you know, to question that and think to yourself, okay, that's not exactly what I believe and this is the reason why. I'm going to leave the last word before we finish with Ben. He says it absolutely right. Risk comes from not knowing what you're doing. Warren Buffett, classic. In other words, failing to prepare is preparing to fail. And that's us. That's us. Thank you very much for joining this one-off special about the property crash in 2022, which will probably never happen. And it's goodbye from her
and him.
Bye from him. Bye-bye for now.
Have a great Sunday, guys. Take care.